Hi, welcome to Flashback Files. I'm Josh Green. Today we're going to take a look at my personal grief. I can't speak to how others grieve, but I just wanted to share my story as I lost my mom in my 20s and been doing a lot of reflection since. I think about her almost every day. And I just wanted to share my experience with it, especially for those who may not have had that experience of losing a loved one closest to you, or maybe you've just lost somebody and you're trying to navigate it. Again, my personal story, I'm not an expert on grief, but I hope my perspective helps give a little bit of insight for what it's worth. So I feel like there are some moments in life that split you in half. There's the you before it happened, and then there's the you after it happened. And that was very evident for me. When my mom passed away in my 20s, I didn't realize that it was one of those moments. It wasn't right away, not even close. People assume loss hits you like a tidal wave, but mine didn't. It came quietly, almost politely, like it was waiting for permission to to eventually ruin my life. It sounds strange, but the first thing I felt was nothing. Like not numb, just nothing. And I carried that nothing for longer than I expected. So this episode is me going back into that time, not to preach, not to give advice, not to pretend I've cracked the code on grief, but to show you what it looked like for me as someone who was still trying to figure out who he was while life was already asking him to grow up. And maybe you've been through something similar, as I mentioned, or you haven't, but you will one day. And some of this will help things make, I hope some of this will help things make a little more sense of when that moment comes. So when it happened, I remember being in the hospital. I remember the tone of the room as she passed. I remember the look on people's faces more than the words they said. And I remember it was almost like an out of body awareness that I should be reacting more dramatically, but I wasn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sobbing. I wasn't breaking down. It wasn't anything. And I just went really quiet. And for years, I thought that made me cold or callous, like maybe something in me was missing. And it took a long time for me to understand that some people grieve by coming apart, and some people grieve by pulling themselves together so tightly that nothing leaks out. I'd say that in retrospect, that I was the second one, a quiet griever, if you will, almost like a hold it together for everyone else or just hold it together for myself at least type. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared so much that I didn't know where to put it, if that makes sense. So one of my entries from back in that time period, I don't know why I'm not crying. I feel like I should, but all I can think about is what needs to be done next. When I wrote that, I wasn't trying to be strong. I was trying to make sense of my own reaction. But now, as I reflect as an adult, I can see exactly what that moment was shaping in me. Some people think grief changes you, and it sure does. It's not in the dramatic personality altering way we imagine. Slowly started to reveal who I was. And the way I process shock, the way I handle responsibility, the way I navigate emotion under pressure, and the way I protect myself, that slowly was being revealed over time. And I felt like these were the early signs of maybe a leader I could eventually become personally and professionally. It's just innate that these leadership qualities come out of you. It's not contrived. It's just organic, and it's only comes through reflection after the fact. So it's not necessarily in a job title sense, but in the how you show up for people sense. And losing my mom younger forced me to meet a version of myself I didn't know existed yet. It was maybe more of a steady one, a quiet one perhaps that can function in chaos, and one who doesn't panic easily. After the funeral service, the world goes back to normal faster than you do. I'm back to work. I'm back to going to stores. Traffic still moves. Small talk returns at the office, and you're sitting there thinking, how is this normal? How does everyone just continue? It's like walking through a city where every building is familiar, but the streets are tilted just slightly off center, if that makes sense. Nothing looks wrong, but you feel wrong. I didn't talk much in those days. I didn't really know how to. I just observed everything. I would notice how people moved and carried themselves, the tone of their voices, and the way that sadness sits behind someone's eyes, even when they smile. And that observational instinct, that thing that I didn't know I had, ended up shaping my leadership style, again, personally and professionally years later. Wasn't corporate leadership, more like human leadership and personal leadership. Empathy in its rawest form. So it wasn't flashy or loud, just the ability to feel when somebody isn't themselves, even if they say they're fine. I didn't learn it in a book. Grief taught me that. There was another entry that I had that says, everyone feels differently than I expected, or maybe I do. I keep waiting for the moment that hits me. I don't know when that will be. It hit me months later, just as a spoiler alert, and then years later, and then randomly through adulthood. That's how grief worked for me. It wasn't following any formula. It didn't ask me for permission, and it didn't care about the timing. It came back like a memory I forgot I saved. And reflecting on that, it's something I didn't really understand in my 20s. I felt like, grief didn't make me mature overnight. It gave me the opportunity to become mature over time, certainly. And there's a big difference. The event alone didn't build the character that I am today. It's the response to it that does. And when you lose somebody, especially when you're young, you're forced to really understand people beyond face value, read emotion without needing someone to explain, tell when someone is hurting, even quietly develop patience, develop perspective, prioritize differently, forgive faster, let small things go, not escalate conflict, treat people with a bit more softness. And it's not because you're trying to be a good leader. It's because you've seen how fast someone can disappear, and it shifts your internal scale. What used to be maybe a big deal prior to losing somebody close to you or just dealing with grief in general, it's suddenly not. And what used to be background noise becomes meaningful. So that shift, I realized over 20 plus years, has still stayed with me, not sweating the small stuff. So there was a delayed grief for me, and it was like a quiet wave, not a tidal wave. And it wasn't in a dramatic moment again. It wasn't at a gravesite. It wasn't during the service. It came in the small, unexpected moments. So, a song. I feel like till this day, I'm connected to my mom every time I hear a Rod Stewart song, for those who know Rod Stewart. Yeah, a movie that we used to watch. So, her and I used to bond over a movie called Saw that would come out annually. We'd go, and it's a horror movie. And that was just something we did. Frankie Valli, we went to see him in concert. These are older references, so just follow me. The idea is there were special moments that my mom and I had that when I get a hint of it showing up in life today, it ties me back to her. Someone laughing the same way she did, or coming home at the time, it was going back to my mom's home. My dad had it for a while and it just felt a little less fuller, if that makes sense, without her presence. So these moments didn't knock me over. They actually cracked me open. They were small, quiet cracks, I'd say, the kind you don't see from the outside. And again, those cracks shaped me. They taught me that strength is not the absence of emotion, it's the ability to keep moving while holding emotion, not ignoring it, not burying it, not holding it. That subtle difference, it matters in leadership. When you're the person who carries the energy of the room, excuse me, or steadies people when they're stressed. You're not doing it because you're fearless. You're doing it because you've learned how to stay grounded in moments that used to overwhelm you. It trained me quietly. One of the other entries that I had, it was, I don't know why this memory is hitting so hard today. Nothing special happened, but something feels heavy. That's the real version of grief for me. No one warned me about. It didn't explode or it just accumulated. And then it teaches me something. People think leadership starts when you get a title, but leadership starts the first time you are forced to steady yourself in a moment when your emotions are louder than your logic. Grief just happens to give you a crash course in that. I eventually learned how to sit with discomfort. I still am learning that, but it accelerated my learning program in that capacity. How to keep showing up when your energy is low, how to hold space for other people, how to choose words carefully, how to be patient. And I think one of the most important lessons for me is how to be present. These aren't corporate leadership traits, they're human traits, the ones that matter the most. And so, what I understand now, 2 decades later, there's something else I didn't understand back then. It was you don't get over losing someone, you grow around it. It stays the same. The grief stays the same size. You just get bigger. Your life expands outward. You have new relationships, new responsibilities, new experiences, new parts of yourself you didn't know existed. Grief becomes one part of a much larger picture. And it's again, it doesn't mean that the person that you're grieving is erased or forgotten. It just gets placed in that bigger picture. And it becomes a reference point, not necessarily a destination. And oddly enough, that perspective shows up in leadership too. Because when you've gone through something real, intensely real, you stop getting knocked off balance by trivial things and you handle feedback differently. You navigate conflict differently. You lead people with a steadier hand. You understand struggle without needing someone to explain it perfectly. That's a quiet confidence that comes from surviving a moment you didn't think you were ready for. If I were to do one final reflection, it was the one it jotted it down. It says, "I hope one day I understand what all of this means. I didn't know it then, but I do now. It meant that I was becoming someone stronger and who was more aware and patient and observant and grounded and connected to people around me, better able to lead personally and professionally, not because I was anywhere near perfect, but because I actually lived through something." I'm not sharing any of this to tell you how grief should look for you. This is my personal experience. As I said in the outset, I'm not trying to share this to tell you how to feel or what your timeline around grief should be. I'm sharing it because when I was younger, I thought I was handling everything wrong, But when I look back, I can see that the quiet way I processed everything, the way I held it together on the outside, the way the real emotions hit me later, the way it changed how I treat people, it wasn't wrong. It was just my individual way, and your way will be your own. If you're young and you've recently lost somebody, or you haven't yet, but life will eventually ask that of you, I hope this episode gives you a little clarity, or for at least from my perspective, and maybe just a little bit of company that somebody else out there has gone through it. Grief to me wasn't a lesson, but it did teach me something. And again, it wasn't in big explosions, it was just in small shifts. And those small shifts shaped me, I should say, as a leader that I eventually became. I hope that helps. Thanks for listening. And until next time, take care.